Hello from London, and it's that time of the month again, time for an update on my basic Japanese project. I started learning the language 18 months ago now, and I'd like to tell you what's new for me and what has been new in June. First of all, if you're new here, welcome. I'm Dr. Gareth Popkins. Here we talk about language learning from many angles. It's not only my own projects, tips and views on language learning, but conversations with inspiring language learners. A bit of vlogging as well, particularly from language learner events. If you haven't yet subscribed for the Vibe, please do, and you can get my free Language Learner Pro training by following the link underneath this video. I've come out onto the balcony to shoot today because the weather is warming up again here in London in early July, and also there aren't nearly so many aircraft flying overhead because of the COVID-19 crisis, which makes filming outside a lot easier than it normally is. Now, my goal with Japanese, since I came back from my first visit to Japan last October, has been to do a minimum 30 minutes a day, at least 5 days a week. And I managed it in June. Actually, I clocked up my 30 minutes focus study on 28 of the 30 days last month. I did 17 hours and 30 minutes, which averaged out at 37 minutes a day on the language over those 28 days when I studied. And my running total with the language since I began in January last year is 280 hours focused study. Now, I've been holding off speaking with this project in contrast to what I did with Basque when I started to speak early and speak often. I've gone back to an older method of mine, which is to throw up the mental scaffolding of the language in my head, an understanding of how it basically works, the basic grammar patterns, and the core vocabulary of 1,000, 2,000 words or so before I actually start to speak. Now, that's something I'll come back to towards the end of this video because I've got a bit of news on that front. But first I wanted to remind you of the materials I've been using if you've been following this project, or introduce them to you if you're here for the first time, and to tell you what I've been doing then with them in June. Now, I'm a great believer in a core textbook because I think, don't reinvent the wheel. We all have to cover the basic same stuff when we're starting a language. So for me, that's been this series, Japanese from Zero. It's very conversationally based. And some exercises in there too. I like those because I like to work in an interactive way with materials. And during June, I was just working on chapter or lesson 11 of this book, actually, out of 13. So I began it at the beginning of the month, and by the end, I'd got through it. There were 3 new verbs in the unit. Actually, Japanese from Zero is a bit coy with its verbs. Not many come up at all in the first book. But in lesson 11 of this level 3 then, sakasu was introduced, which means to look for, and also the word yaru, which is another verb meaning to do. Suru was the one I'd come across already. The Chinese writing system, or the character-based writing system from Chinese, the kanji, are also being introduced in the 3rd book. I'd already learnt the other 2 syllable-based and rather easier Japanese writing systems, but there were 8 kanji again in this unit, or lesson 11, including the one for book, hon, which is very useful because it comes up even in the word Japan itself, nihon. So that was fun to learn. I said I'd already learned right at the beginning the syllabary writing systems called the kana together. That's the hiragana and the katakana. And I should stress that although I'm not learning the characters very actively, I do write a lot of kana because all the exercises in Japanese from Zero are in kana, and with my other book where I'm doing a lot of written exercises, which is an old Teach Yourself Japanese, I'll come back to that in a minute, I'm also writing those exercises out in the kana, although that book itself only uses transliteration, romanji, Latin letters, for the Japanese. So, pressing on with Japanese from Zero, but also working with my second course, which is Le Japonais from Assimil. I like to have a second course because, authors come at things from a different angle. Things are dealt with, the high-frequency things, which every book will contain, in a different order. So there's an element of either reinforcement of what I've already covered in Japanese from Zero, or preparing the ground for when it comes up in Japanese from Zero. There are 100 lessons in the Assimil. They're quite short. They're very dialogue-based, something I like. Again, like Japanese from Zero, actually, in that sense. Even less explanation, just footnoted grammar light explanation, and very good and accessible audio in an MP3 format, which is much easier than the online audio, which is rather difficult to access, and some of it you have to pay extra for, of Japanese Sim Zero. So during June, I worked through chapters 36 and 37 of Assimil, doing dictation exercises as the core with their initial conversations, trying very carefully to listen intently and to write down what I hear. It's a wonderful disciplined exercise, I think. So in addition to that, I've also been reviewing Assimil's earlier lessons in bed very often in the morning, first thing when I wake up or last thing at night. Sort of a mini, what I call a satellite slot, another study session, or a satellite slot light, if you like, because I'm just doing it in bed, but carefully reading through to keep some of the older lessons in my head, to constantly review them, if you like. Now, the third book I have is this one called Teach Yourself Japanese. It's a very old edition from the popular still Teach Yourself series, actually from the 1950s and 1971 reprint. And I wouldn't recommend this if you're just starting, if you're not someone who's an experienced language learner and has maybe done some Japanese elsewhere with one of the more accessible books first, because it's not particularly user-friendly. But what it does have is a lot of backwards and forwards, so two-way translation exercises and a lot of grammar explanation, which again is useful for me to understand the nuts and bolts of how the language works, because that's something I quite like in my language learning. So in June, I worked through lessons 15 and 16 of Teach Yourself Japanese. Now, I said earlier that I've been putting off speaking the language, but the news is that for July, rather than the plan being more of the same, which is what it has been for the last few months when I've been reporting back to you, I'm actually going to start having some one-to-one speaking practice. And that's because my friend John Fotheringham from Language Mastery is running what he's calling a Conversation Accelerator program. There are 40 of us in it. When I got the email, I was excited because it seemed to come just at the right time for me to give me a bit of a push to start speaking. And we've got different tasks to do each week during the 4 weeks, lots of help from John. And so I've started actually today with my first one-to-one Skype lesson with a native Japanese teacher through italki.com, the site I use for all my language learning one-to-one lessons actually, and I'll put a link to that underneath this video too. So I think, you know, the work on this Japanese Accelerator is going to take a lot of my time in July. And by coincidence, John recommends that one puts in at least half an hour a day. So it's more or less the same sort of commitment as I was putting in. But I predict less work in the textbooks in July, more with the Conversation Accelerator, and we'll see what tasks he has in store for us for the coming weeks. That then is the plan. I look forward to reporting back to you on it in a month's time with the next monthly update. As always, do share your experiences, your thoughts, your tips, your problems with Japanese in the comments below. And I hope to see you here on the channel again soon. Thanks a lot for watching. Ja mata!